As the space station hummed softly around him, Luke was sitting in his quarters working late into the night. The soft glow of the monitors illuminated the small room, casting shadows across his desk. He was a simple engineer, one of the many humans stationed on the orbital platform. Most of his tasks were routine, fixing machinery, maintaining systems, and making sure everything ran smoothly. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a job, and he did it well. The station was a marvel of human engineering. A city in the stars orbiting a distant planet on the far edge of the galaxy. Despite the cutting-edge technology that surrounded him, Luke often felt like a cog in a machine. The idea of being a part of something bigger was lost on him. But that night, everything was about to change. Luke had just finished a long report when he heard a soft chime from his door. He was about to ignore it, assuming it was another routine message, when the door slid open with a smooth whoosh. His eyes widened, and his mouth went dry. Standing in the doorway was a woman unlike anyone he had ever seen. She was tall, almost unnaturally tall, and her skin glowed a soft shade of blue, shimmering like the light from a distant star. Her hair, long and silver, flowed like liquid metal down her back. But it was her eyes that truly caught Luke's attention. They were a striking shade of violet, filled with a depth that made Luke feel like he was staring into the unknown. The woman stepped into his room with a confidence that immediately unsettled him. She didn't wait for an invitation, and there was no hesitation in her movements. The way she carried herself, so gracefully, so self-assured, made Luke feel as though he was no longer in control of the situation. Before he could gather his thoughts, she reached up and pulled off the high collar of her spacesuit, revealing smooth, glowing skin beneath. Luke's heart raced as she casually dropped the suit to the floor, revealing more of her intricate markings and tattoos, symbols that seemed to tell a story of a people and a culture far beyond his understanding. Can I help you?" Luke stammered, his voice cracking slightly. The woman looked at him with a smile that seemed both knowing and playful, her lips curling at the edges. There was a mischievous glint in her eyes as she took a few steps closer, her movements smooth and deliberate. "I'm Nira," she said, her voice soft but clear, as if every word was carefully chosen. "I've come to speak with you." Luke blinked, still unsure of what was happening. He had seen aliens before, of course. He worked on a space station. After all, but this was different. She wasn't just any alien. The aura around her was otherworldly. It was as if she belonged to another realm entirely. "I didn't mean to intrude," Nira continued, her smile never fading. "But I have a very important reason for being here. You, Luke, are the one who can help me." The mention of his name made Luke's pulse quicken. How did she know who he was? He barely left his quarters unless it was for work, and he didn't have the reputation of being someone who stood out on the station. "Help you?" he repeated, still trying to process the situation. "I think you've got the wrong person." Nira shook, her head, her silver hair shimmering as she did. "No, I know exactly who you are. You're the engineer who can fix things that no one else can. You're the one I need." Luke couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Who was she, really? And what did she want from him? Before he could ask any more questions, Nira's eyes flashed with something like amusement. She took another step toward him, and for a moment, Luke felt as though he couldn't move. The air seemed to thicken and the distance between them shrank with every second. "I've heard much about you, Luke," she continued, her voice low and almost hypnotic. "Your reputation precedes you. You're known for your skills, but there's something more, isn't there? Something hidden beneath the surface." Luke swallowed hard, his mouth dry. There was no denying the way she was looking at him, intensely, as if she could see every thought in his head. But he couldn't understand why. He was just a regular guy doing his job. "I don't know what you're talking about," Luke said, his voice shaking a little. He tried to back away, but the space station room felt smaller and smaller, closing in on him. Nira smiled again, this time with more warmth. "You'll understand soon enough," she said. I didn't come here to make you feel uncomfortable. I came here because I need your help with something very important." The words hung in the air, their weight growing heavier with each passing second. "I'm listening," Luke said. His curiosity piqued despite his nervousness. He couldn't help it. There was something about her that drew him in, something that made him want to know more. Nira took a deep breath, and for the first time, she seemed to relax. "I come from a distant world, Luke. My people are in need of assistance, and we believe humanity holds the key to our survival." Luke furrowed his brow. "Your people? And you think I can help?" She nodded, her violet eyes gleaming. "Yes. I've come to offer you a partnership. We need your skills, your knowledge of human technology. In return, you'll be given access to things you could never imagine." Luke's mind raced. He was an engineer, sure, but he had never worked on anything of such importance. What did she mean by access to things? And what did she need from him? "I'm just a guy who fixes things," Luke muttered, still trying to wrap his head around everything. "Why would you need someone like me?" "Because," Nira said, stepping closer once more, "you're not just any engineer. You're the one who can unlock what's hidden, and I can't do it without you." The gravity of her words began to sink in. There was something more to this. He had the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. And Nira, with all her beauty and mystery, was at the center of it. Before Luke could ask any more questions, she walked over to a small table, her movements fluid and elegant. She picked up a small device, a piece of alien technology Luke hadn't seen before, and handed it to him. "This is a key," she said. "A key to something that could change everything. But I need you to help me unlock it, will you?" Luke stared at the device in his hand, feeling the weight of the decision in his chest. He could turn her away, pretend nothing had happened, and go on with his ordinary life. Or he could say yes. He could step into a world full of mysteries and dangers, guided by this alien woman who seemed to hold all the answers. He looked up at her, her violet eyes full of anticipation. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. His life was about to change forever. "I'll help you," Luke said, his voice steady despite the storm raging in his chest. "But I need to know more." Nira smiled again, her expression one of quiet triumph. "Of course," she said softly. "You will." And with that, Luke's world tilted on its axis, and nothing would ever be the same again. Luke sat at his desk, staring at the small alien device Nira had handed him. His mind was racing, still unable to fully comprehend what had just happened. He had been working as an engineer on a space station for years, fixing machines and maintaining equipment. But this was something entirely different. He glanced up at Nira, who was standing across from him, watching him carefully. She hadn't spoken since she handed him the device, but her presence was almost overwhelming. There was a calmness about her, a quiet confidence that made everything she did seem important. And the way she looked at him, it was as if she knew things about him that no one else did. "You've come a long way from Earth, I assume," Luke said, breaking the silence. He wasn't sure what to say, but he had to ask something. His head was spinning and he needed to understand what was happening. Nira smiled softly, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Yes, I've traveled far. My people have been exploring the stars for centuries, seeking knowledge and alliances. But we've reached a point where we need help." She paused, taking a deep breath. "And that's where you come in, Luke." Luke didn't know what to say. He was just a regular engineer. What could he possibly do for an alien race? He felt a mix of confusion and curiosity. Nira's calm demeanor only made it more difficult to refuse her, but at the same time he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being pulled into something far beyond his understanding. "You keep saying that I can help," Luke said slowly, still looking at the device in his hand. "But you haven't told me exactly what you need me to do." Nira stepped closer, her eyes intense and serious now. "You have the ability to fix things that no one else can. You understand how to repair complex systems, human systems. But what you don't know is that the technology you work with every day is just a small part of a much larger picture. The device you're holding is one of many, Luke. It's part of a key, one that can unlock the future for my people. But it requires someone with a very specific set of skills to activate it. Luke's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure he understood all of what Naira had said, but one thing was clear. This was no ordinary task. The device felt heavier, in his hand now, as if it was somehow linked to something far more important than he could grasp. "I'm not sure what you mean," Luke said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I fix machines. I don't unlock ancient alien technology." Naira's smile returned, though it was less playful this time and more knowing. "That's where you're wrong, Luke. You have the key to understanding this technology. You've been working with machines your whole life, learning how they work, how to fix them. This," she gestured to the device in his hand, "isn't just a machine. It's a puzzle that only you can solve." Luke shook his head. "I'm just an engineer. How can I solve something like this?" "You've been solving problems your whole life," Naira said, her voice firm. "This is no different, but the stakes are much higher. This technology, this key, can change everything. It can save my people." Luke looked at her, confused. "Save them from what?" Naira's face grew somber. "From extinction. Our people are in danger, Luke. The enemy we've been fighting has grown stronger. And now we have no choice but to turn to humanity. You've been chosen because you have the skills to help us." Luke's mind was racing. He could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him, but he still couldn't understand why she had chosen him. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a soldier. He was just someone who worked on machines. But Naira believed in him. She saw something in him that he couldn't see in himself. "You say you need my help," Luke said slowly. "But what exactly do I need to do?" Naira's violet eyes locked onto his, and for a moment Luke felt as though he was falling into them. "You need to help me activate the key, Luke. You need to unlock the power that's hidden inside it, and once you do, you'll be able to save us." The seriousness in her tone made Luke's stomach tighten. He felt a knot form in his chest. He had never imagined that he would be asked to do something like this. He was just an engineer. How could he possibly have the power to save an entire alien race? "But how?" Luke asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't even know where to begin." Naira smiled again, this time with a sense of reassurance. "You'll learn. I'll teach you everything you need to know. All I need is your trust, Luke. Together we can unlock this power." Luke looked down at the device in his hand, his fingers tracing the smooth surface. The symbols etched into it were unlike anything he had ever seen before. There was something beautiful about it, something ancient and mysterious. It was a piece of technology that felt out of place in his hands, yet it felt like it was meant for him. "I don't know if I can do this," Luke said quietly, his voice full of doubt. "I'm not ready for something like this." Naira placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and steady. "You don't need to be ready. You're more capable than you think. Trust in yourself, trust in me." Luke met her gaze again, and for the first time since she had walked into his room, he didn't feel like a helpless bystander. There was something about Naira, something about the way she believed in him, that made him want to try. "Okay," he said, his voice firm. "I'll help you." Naira's smile widened, and Luke could see the relief in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "You don't know how much this means to my people." "I still don't fully understand what's going on," Luke admitted, "but I'll do my best." Naira nodded. "That's all I ask." Over the next few hours, Naira explained the situation in more detail. She told Luke about her people's history, how they had once been a thriving civilization but had fallen into decline after a series of devastating wars. Now their enemies were closing in, and they had no choice but to rely on the technology they had uncovered during their travels through the stars. The key, as Naira explained, was part of a larger device that could harness energy from the very fabric of space itself. If activated, it could provide her people with the power to defend themselves, But unlocking its potential was no simple task. The technology was ancient, and its creators had left behind only cryptic clues. "It's not just a machine," Nera said, her voice full of conviction. "It's a weapon that could change the course of the war, but only if it's unlocked in the right way." Luke listened carefully, absorbing the information. He had always been good at understanding machines, but this was something else entirely. He wasn't sure if he was ready to be part of something so big, so dangerous. But there was no turning back now. He had made a decision, and he wasn't going to back out. "I'll help you," he repeated, more to himself than to Naira. "We'll figure this out together." Naira smiled, her violet eyes glowing with a mix of gratitude and determination. "I knew I could count on you." The next few days on the station passed in a blur of activity. Luke found himself working with Naira more closely than ever before. She guided him through the alien technology, explaining its purpose and how it functioned, but there was still so much he didn't understand. The device she had shown him, the key, was only one small piece of a much larger puzzle. Naira had a calm, patient way of teaching him, and Luke found himself more drawn to her with each passing hour. Despite the weight of the mission, there was something comforting about the way she looked at him, like she believed in him more than he believed in himself. Luke had always been good with machines, but this technology was different. It didn't work the way human technology did. The symbols on the device were a language he had never seen before, and yet when he touched the device, he felt an odd sense of connection. It was as though it was speaking to him in a way that transcended words. One evening, after hours of studying the device, Luke finally looked up from his work and met Naira's gaze. "I think I'm starting to understand it," he said, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "But I still don't get how it's all supposed to fit together. This is bigger than anything I've ever worked on." Naira nodded, her violet eyes focused on him. "It's not just about fixing something, Luke. It's about unlocking a power that's been dormant for centuries. My people discovered this technology long ago, but we've never been able to fully activate it. It's only now that we've found someone who can help us." Luke swallowed, still unsure of what he had gotten himself into. "I'm not sure if I'm the right person for this. What if I make a mistake?" Naira smiled, her calm demeanor never wavering. "I trust you, Luke. You've already shown me that you have the ability to understand things in a way no one else can. That's why I need you. We don't have much time. If we don't activate this technology soon, we may not have another chance." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Luke had heard the urgency in her voice before, but it was different now. He could feel it, the pressure building, the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. He wasn't just fixing a machine anymore. He was playing a part in something that could change the fate of an entire alien race. "I'll do my best," Luke said, trying to sound confident, "but I still don't know what this key is supposed to unlock." Naira's expression grew more serious, her violet eyes reflecting a deep sadness. "The key, Luke, is not just a physical object, it's a symbol of our people's hope. My race has been on the brink of extinction for years. We've been fighting a war and we've lost almost everything. But this technology, it's our last chance. If we can unlock its full potential, it will give us the power to defend ourselves and rebuild our civilization." Luke looked at the device again, his mind racing. He had thought of it as just another piece of alien technology, something he could fix and understand. But now he realized it was much more than that. It was a weapon, a key to survival, and the fate of an entire people rested on his shoulders. "Why didn't you just ask someone else?" Luke asked, still trying to understand why Naira had chosen him. "Why me?" Naira's gaze softened, and for a moment Luke saw something vulnerable in her eyes. "Because you understand more than you know. You see the patterns. You think differently than anyone I've met. That's why I came to you." Luke felt a strange mix of emotions. He had never considered himself special, never thought of himself as someone who could change the course of history. But Naira seemed so certain, so convinced that he was the one who could help her people. It was hard to ignore the sense of responsibility that was now growing inside him. The next day, Nira led Luke to a hidden part of the station, a place he had never been before. The air was cool and quiet, and the walls of the corridor were lined with strange symbols and markings. As they walked deeper into the chamber, Luke felt a growing sense of unease. This place was different. It felt ancient, as if it had been untouched for centuries. Nira stopped in front of a massive door, its surface covered in more of the strange symbols. "This," she said, "is where it all begins." Luke stared. At the door, his heart pounding in his chest. The symbols seemed to pulse with an energy that was both unsettling and fascinating. "What is this place?" "This is the heart of our people," Nira said softly. "The device we've been searching for is hidden behind this door. It's the key to unlocking everything." She stepped forward and placed her hand on the door. A soft hum filled the air, and the symbols on the surface of the door began to glow faintly. Luke watched in awe as the door slowly opened, revealing a chamber beyond. Inside, the room was vast, its walls covered in glowing panels and strange, intricate machinery. In the center of the room stood a large pedestal, and atop it rested a massive crystal, glowing with a deep blue light. The crystal seemed to pulse with energy, its light shifting and changing as if alive. "This is the core," Nira explained. "It holds the power to activate the device. But we need the key, your key, to unlock it." Luke stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the crystal. He had never seen anything like it before. The energy radiating from it was unlike anything he had ever felt. It was both beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Once we unlock it," Nira continued, "we'll have the power to turn the tide of the war, but we need to act quickly. Our enemies are closing in and they know about the crystal. If they get their hands on it before we do, it could be the end of everything." Luke's heart raced as he looked at the crystal. He had always been just a guy who fixed things, but now he was standing in front of something that could change the future. He could feel the weight of the decision before him, the pressure building with every passing second. He had no idea if he was ready for this, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn back now. "I don't know how to unlock it," Luke said, his voice filled with uncertainty. Nira turned to him, her eyes filled with understanding. "You already know how, Luke. You just need to trust yourself." Luke stared at the crystal, trying to steady his breathing. He had fixed machines before, but this was different. This was no ordinary task. He wasn't just unlocking a door or a piece of technology. He was unlocking the future of an entire species. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing against the surface of the key. As soon as he touched it, a surge of energy shot through him. He felt a jolt of power run through his body, and the device in his hand began to hum softly. The symbols on the crystal seemed to shift and change, aligning with the symbols on the device. It was as if the two were meant to fit together. "Do it, Luke," Nira urged, her voice barely a whisper. "Unlock it." With a deep breath, Luke pressed the device against the crystal. There was a blinding flash of light, and for a moment Luke felt as though he was being pulled into another world. The energy from the crystal surged through him, and he could feel the power coursing through his veins. It was overwhelming, but at the same time, it felt right. He was connected to something much bigger than himself. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the light faded. Luke staggered back, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked up at the crystal, and to his amazement, it was glowing brighter than ever before. The chamber was filled with a soft hum, and the air seemed to vibrate with the energy that now pulsed from the crystal. Nira's eyes shone with excitement. "You did it, Luke. You unlocked it." Luke's breath was shallow, but he couldn't help but smile. He had done it. He had unlocked the power that could save Nira's people, and in that moment he realized something. He wasn't just an engineer anymore. He was part of something much greater than himself. The chamber hummed with energy, and Luke's heart raced as he stood, breathing heavily, staring at the glowing crystal before him. The symbols on the device in his hand still pulsed faintly, resonating with the powerful energy that had just been unlocked. He felt the vibrations from the crystal in his fingertips, and it was as though he could hear the very heartbeat of the ancient technology beneath his touch. Naira stood by his side, her expression one of quiet amazement. The excitement in her violet eyes was unmistakable, yet there was something else in her gaze, a deep, pressing sense of urgency. Luke could feel it too. The mission had shifted. It wasn't just about unlocking the crystal anymore. It was about survival, and the consequences of failure were far greater than he had ever imagined. "You did it," Naira said, her voice full of awe. "We have the power now, but we need to move quickly." Luke still couldn't believe what had just happened. The crystal, once dormant and inactive, was now alive with energy. The chamber, once silent and still, was now filled with a low, resonant hum, as though the very walls were vibrating with the force of the power he had just unlocked. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. "I don't understand," Luke said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happens now? We unlocked it, but what's next?" Naira's gaze softened as she placed a hand on his arm, steadying him. "Now we must use the power, Luke. The technology is only useful if we activate the full system. It's a weapon that can change the tide of the war. But to do that, we need to get it to the right place." Luke's stomach tightened. The weight of her words pressed down on him. He hadn't fully understood the enormity of what he had just done. This wasn't just unlocking some ancient artifact. This was a weapon that could alter the balance of power in the universe. And now, Luke was holding the key to activating it. "Where do we go?" Luke asked, looking at the crystal. It seemed like the answer was just out of reach, like there was something more that he needed to understand. Naira's eyes darkened slightly as she stepped back, her hands clasped in front of her. "We have to take it to a secure location. There's a base on the far side of the station. A place where we can control the weapon's power and use it to defend ourselves." "But it's not going to be easy," Luke frowned. "What do you mean?" "The enemy is already aware of what we've done," Naira said, her voice low, her eyes scanning the chamber. "They know we've activated the crystal, and they're coming. We don't have much time before they reach us." A cold shiver ran down Luke's spine. He had known the stakes were high, but hearing Naira say it so directly made it feel all too real. He was no longer just fixing machines or tinkering with alien tech. He was in the middle of a war. The lives of millions, if not more, were now depending on him. "Are we ready?" Luke asked, his voice uncertain. He still felt like he was just a small part of something much bigger, like a cog in a machine that was already in motion. How had it all escalated so quickly? Naira's expression hardened. "We don't have a choice. If we don't get the crystal to the base in time, the weapon will fall into the hands of our enemies. And that would mean the end of everything we've fought for." Luke swallowed, his mind spinning. The situation was far beyond anything he had imagined. He had thought helping Naira would be about solving a puzzle, unlocking a piece of technology, maybe getting some answers. But this was a race against time, and the stakes were higher than he could have ever guessed. "Then we go," Luke said, his voice firmer now, filled with resolve. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he wasn't going to back down. He had made a decision, and he was going to see it through. The journey to the base was tense and silent. Luke followed Naira through the station's corridors, their footsteps echoing in the quiet metal hallways. The further they went, the more the sense of urgency grew. The station, once bustling with activity, now felt almost deserted. The only sounds were the hum of machinery and the soft footfalls of the two of them. As they reached the docking bay, Naira stopped in front of a small, sleek spacecraft. It was unlike any ship Luke had ever seen. Its design was smooth and aerodynamic, with a metallic sheen that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. The ship looked advanced, its sleek form a far cry from the bulky utilitarian crafts Luke was used to. "This is the fastest way to the base," Naira said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "It's small, but it'll get us there before the enemy can catch up." Luke nodded, feeling a knot tighten in his chest. They had no time to waste. As Naira guided him inside the ship, Luke couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every step he took felt calculated, every sound magnified in the stillness of the station. They were racing against time, and the enemy was already on their heels. Once inside, Naira activated the ship's systems, and the hum of the engines filled the cabin. Luke sat down in the seat across from her, his hands clenched on his lap. He couldn't help but wonder just how much danger they were in. "What's the plan once we get to the base?" Luke asked, trying to focus on something other than the growing sense of dread in his chest. Naira's hands flew across the controls, her movements precise and practiced. "Once we arrive, we'll activate the weapon and connect it to the base's mainframe. The crystal will channel its energy into the system and we'll be able to use it to fight back." Luke nodded, his mind racing. "And if we don't get there in time?" Naira didn't answer right away. She kept her eyes fixed on the controls, her expression hardening. "Then the enemy will have the crystal, and we'll lose everything." There was a moment of silence, and Luke could feel the weight of her words settling in. The responsibility that had once felt distant now pressed heavily on him. He had unlocked the crystal, but the hardest part was yet to come. If they didn't succeed, everything they had fought for would be for nothing. The ship sped through the station's outer ring, the stars outside the window blurring into streaks of light as they moved faster than Luke had ever thought possible. The journey felt like it lasted forever, but in reality, it only took a few minutes. The tension in the air grew with every passing second. Luke couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. "Are we there yet?" Luke asked, his voice tinged with impatience. "We're close," Naira replied, her eyes scanning the readouts. "But we're not alone." Luke's heart skipped a beat as he glanced out the window. In the distance, he could see several ships, dark and menacing, closing in on their position. The enemy had found them. "Hold on," Naira said, her voice suddenly more intense. "It's going to get rough." Luke felt the ship lurch as Naira engaged the engines, the craft lurching forward with surprising speed. The enemy ships were gaining on them, and Luke could feel the pressure mounting. This was it, the moment they had been racing toward. The fate of the mission, and possibly the entire galaxy, rested on their success. As the enemy ships closed in, Naira spoke again, her voice calm but resolute. "We'll make it, Luke. We have to." Luke nodded, gripping his seat as the ship tore through space. The enemy ships were close now, their weapons locking onto their small craft. The tension was unbearable, and Luke knew that they were running out of time. The ship rocked violently as Naira expertly navigated the sleek craft through the chaotic expanse of space. The enemy ships were closing in fast, their dark silhouettes growing larger in the viewports. Luke's breath quickened as he gripped his seat, the tension in the air thick and suffocating. The battle for control of the crystal and for survival was about to reach its breaking point. "Hang on," Naira shouted over the roar of the engines, her voice filled with determination. "We're almost there." Luke's eyes darted between the control panel and the enemy ships now in pursuit. The station's outer ring was growing closer with every passing second, the base they were trying to reach just beyond it. But the enemy wasn't going to make this easy. They had known about the crystal's activation, and now they were willing to do anything to stop it. "How much farther?" Luke shouted, his voice almost lost in the noise. "We're close," Naira replied, her hands a blur as she worked the controls. "Just a little more, Luke. Trust me." But trust was getting harder to come by. Luke's mind raced. He had unlocked the crystal's power. But what was next? Naira had told him that they needed to get to the base to activate the weapon, but there was still so much he didn't know. The crystal, the ancient alien technology, the war. He was deep in the middle of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. But something about the way Naira was acting was starting to make him question everything. He watched her face, her focus intense as she worked the ship's controls, steering them through the oncoming fire. Her eyes were filled with purpose. But there was something else there too. Something hidden beneath the surface. Luke couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Naira's mission than she had let on. She had never fully explained why this technology was so important or what the stakes truly were. As the ship lurched forward, a sudden jolt threw Luke against the seat. The ship had been hit. He could hear the warning lights flashing, the sound of alarms blaring in the background. "Naira!" Luke shouted, panic rising in his chest. "Are we okay?" Naira gritted her teeth, her eyes still locked on the controls. "We're fine," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Just a little hit. Hold on." Luke's heart pounded as the enemy ships continued their pursuit. The base was so close now, but they were running out of time. The ship shuddered again, and Luke could feel the power of the engines straining against the damage they had already taken. "We need to get out of here now," Luke urged, his voice rising in desperation. Naira's gaze flickered briefly to the viewport as another blast from the enemy ships hit their craft. She took a deep breath as if gathering her resolve before turning to face him. "Listen, Luke," she said, her voice softer now, though still filled with an unwavering strength. "There's something I haven't told you. Something important." Luke felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "What do you mean?" Naira looked at him, her violet eyes reflecting a mix of sorrow and determination. "I didn't just come to you because you could fix things. I came to you because of what you are, what you're capable of." Luke frowned, confused. "What do you mean by that?" "I'm just an engineer." "You're more than that," Naira said softly. "You've been chosen. My people, my race, have been searching for someone like you for centuries. Someone who can help us activate the crystal, someone who can harness its power. But there's something else you need to know." Luke's mind raced. "What do you mean? What are you not telling me?" Naira took a deep breath, and for the first time she seemed to hesitate. "The crystal, Luke, it's not just a weapon. It's a tool that can reshape reality itself. It's a power that can be used to rebuild our civilization or destroy everything. And the truth is, it's not just about saving my people. It's about saving the entire galaxy." Luke stared at her, his heart racing. "What do you mean, reshape reality? How is that possible?" Naira met his gaze, her expression serious. "The crystal holds the power to manipulate space and time. It can alter the fabric of reality itself, creating new worlds, new timelines. My people have been using it to travel through the stars, to escape the destruction of our enemies. But now, we need to unlock its full potential to stop them." Luke felt a chill run down his spine. The idea of manipulating reality itself was something beyond anything he had ever imagined. It sounded impossible, dangerous. But Naira seemed so certain, so sure of herself. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Luke asked, his voice thick with confusion and frustration. Naira's gaze softened. "I wanted to, but I couldn't. I didn't know if you'd be ready to hear it. I didn't know if you'd be able to understand the gravity of what we're up against." Luke's mind was spinning. The crystal was no longer just a piece of alien technology. It was a weapon of unimaginable power. And now, he was at the center of it all. The fate of entire civilizations rested on his ability to understand and use this power. "We need to get to the base," Naira said, her voice suddenly filled with urgency again. "If we don't, the enemies will take the crystal and they'll use it to destroy us all. We're almost there, Luke. We can make it." But Luke couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The more Naira explained, the more questions arose in his mind. Why had she chosen him? Why had his skills as an engineer been so important? And what did she mean when she said that his abilities were tied to the crystal? "Wait," Luke said, his voice suddenly firm. "You've been saying that I have some kind of special ability. What is it? What do you really need me for?" Naira hesitated, her eyes flickering with something unreadable. "You don't know, do you?" she said softly. "Know what?" Luke asked, his pulse quickening. Naira took a deep breath, her voice barely a whisper. "You're not just an engineer, Luke. You're a key to unlocking the true power of the crystal. My people have been searching for someone with your skills, but also with something more. Something you don't even realize you have. The crystal responds to you in a way it doesn't respond to anyone else. Luke felt his heart skip a beat. What do you mean? I don't have anything special about me. I'm just me. Naira's gaze softened, and she reached out to touch his arm gently. You're not just you, Luke. You're the one who can activate the crystal fully. You're the one who can channel its power. I didn't come to you by accident. You've always been part of this, even if you didn't know it. Luke's mind was racing. He felt a wave of confusion and disbelief wash over him. He was more than just an engineer. He had the ability to control the crystal's power. It didn't make sense, but the more he thought about it, the more it seemed possible. The way the crystal had reacted to him, the way it hummed when he touched it, it was as if it recognized him. Why didn't you tell me this before? Luke asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why keep it a secret? Naira's face was filled with a deep sadness. Because I didn't know if you were ready. I didn't know if you would understand the weight of what you were about to carry. Luke stared at her, his mind racing. He had no idea what he was really capable of. But one thing was certain. Everything was changing. He wasn't just an engineer anymore. He was part of something far greater than himself. The power of the crystal was in his hands, and he was about to make a choice that could determine the fate of not just one civilization, but the entire galaxy. Luke sat in the small cockpit of the ship, his fingers trembling slightly as they gripped the edge of his seat. The stars outside were nothing more than streaks of light as Naira guided the ship at breakneck speeds toward the base. The moment they'd been rushing toward had arrived. The base loomed in the distance, a dark, imposing structure against the backdrop of the station's outer ring. Luke felt the weight of everything pressing down on him, heavier than ever before. He had come a long way from the quiet engineer he once was, tinkering away in the corners of the station. Now he held the fate of entire civilizations in his hands. The crystal, with its power to reshape reality itself, pulsed in his mind, its energy still fresh from the moment he had unlocked it. Naira had explained everything, the crystal's true power, the weight of the choice they now faced. The truth was clear. If they succeeded, they could save her people. But if they failed, they risked everything. But Luke still had doubts. The truth about his own role in this mission, the fact that he was more than just an engineer, that he was somehow connected to the crystal, still unsettled him. How could he wield such power? How could he be the key to something so monumental? Luke, Naira's voice cut through his thoughts, calm and steady, yet filled with urgency. We're almost there. This is it. We have to be ready. He turned, to face her, her violet eyes filled with determination. She was so sure, so confident in their mission. He wished he could share her certainty. But deep down, Luke was afraid. Afraid of what the crystal could do. Afraid of the responsibility, now on his shoulders. I'm ready, he said, though he wasn't sure if he meant it. He wasn't ready for this. No one ever could be. You don't have to be ready, Naira said, sensing his uncertainty. You've already done more than I could have ever hoped for. Trust yourself. Trust in the power you unlocked. It's not just about the crystal, Luke. It's about your ability to make the right choice. Luke looked out the viewport, his heart pounding. The base was closer now, and the dark shapes of enemy ships were trailing behind them, their weapons charging. The chase was almost over. The moment to act was fast approaching. They're gaining on us, Luke said, pointing to the enemy ships that were closing in. The base was so close, but it was clear that they wouldn't make it without a fight. We don't have time for a fight, Naira replied, her voice sharp. We have to get to the core. The base will protect us. We just need to hold them off, long enough to reach it. Luke nodded, his mind racing. It was now or never. He had to decide what kind of person he wanted to be. The quiet engineer, just following orders, or the man who could change the course of history. As they neared the base, Luke's eyes were drawn to the crystal resting on the table next to him. It was glowing softly, the power inside it still raw, still waiting to be unlocked. He had felt its power surge through him when he first touched it. He had felt the way it responded to him, almost like it knew him. But now, as the base grew closer, the responsibility felt heavier. We can't let them have it. Naira said, her voice filled with quiet resolve. This power must be used for the right reasons. We can't let our enemies control it. Luke's fingers hovered over the controls, his mind made up. I know, he said, his voice steady. Let's do this. Naira's expression softened, and she gave him a small, approving smile. You're ready now, Luke. This is your choice. You're not just unlocking the crystal. You're deciding what happens next. As they approached the base, the ship's engines whined in protest, struggling to maintain speed. The enemy ships were closing in too quickly. Luke's heart raced, his thoughts a whirlwind of questions and doubts. What if he couldn't control the power of the crystal? What if using it to save Naira's people was the wrong decision? He glanced at Naira, whose face was set in determined focus. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. She had believed in him from the beginning, and now it was his turn to believe in himself. Luke, Naira's voice broke through his thoughts again. This is our only chance. We can't wait any longer. With a deep breath, Luke nodded. I'm ready. The base came into view, massive and imposing, a fortress of metal and light. They were almost there, but the enemy ships were right behind them, their weapons charging. Luke could feel the weight of his decision. He had to act now. Prepare for docking, Naira shouted as she guided the ship into the base's docking bay. The ship jolted as it made contact with the station, the engines shutting off with a final, tired hum. Luke's heart was pounding in his chest as the hatch opened. He and Naira rushed out of the ship, moving quickly through the corridors of the base. The base was alive with activity, engineers and soldiers alike moving in every direction, preparing for what was to come. It wasn't just a base, it was a final stand, a place where everything would be decided. The core's this way, Naira called over her shoulder as she led the way. Luke followed, his mind racing as he tried to calm his thoughts. The crystal, the power it held, it was all too much. But he knew one thing for sure. He had to make the right choice. He had to use this power to protect the future. For Naira, for her people, for the galaxy. As they entered the central chamber, the room was filled with soldiers and engineers working furiously to prepare the base's defenses. In the center stood a large console, and behind it, the glowing core, the device that would channel the power of the crystal. It was all coming together. Luke's steps faltered as he looked around the room. The situation was getting more chaotic. By the second, the enemy ships were closing in on the base, and there was no more time to waste. The pressure was overwhelming, but he couldn't hesitate. Luke, Naira said, her voice full of urgency. We need to activate the crystal now. Luke nodded, stepping forward. His heart was pounding and his hands were trembling as he approached the console. He placed the crystal into the designated slot, and immediately the console lit up with glowing symbols. The energy from the crystal surged through the system, filling the room with a hum of power. Luke felt it deep in his chest, the pulse of something greater than himself. As the energy flowed through the console, the base's weapon systems powered up. The massive shields that surrounded the station flickered to life, and the enemy ships that had been closing in suddenly faltered. But even as the power surged through the base, Luke felt a sense of unease. The crystal, the power, it was immense, and he wasn't sure he could control it. What if it was too much? What if they unleashed something they couldn't stop? Luke. Focus, Naira said urgently, her eyes locked on him. You're the key. You have to control it. You can do this. Luke's mind cleared as he looked at her. He wasn't just an engineer anymore. He was the one who could decide what happened next. He had unlocked the crystal. He had harnessed its power. Now, he had to use it for good. With a deep breath, Luke focused on the power flowing through the base. He could feel the crystal's energy vibrating beneath his skin, and he knew that if he didn't act, everything would fall apart. With a final push of willpower, he reached out and stabilized the flow of energy. The room hummed with power, and the base's weapon systems locked into place. The enemy ships that had been closing in on them began to retreat. The shields held strong, and the base's defenses were fully activated. The battle for control, of the crystal had been won. Luke stepped back, his breath heavy with exertion. Nyra's eyes met his, filled with gratitude and awe. "You did it," she said softly, her voice full of emotion. Luke looked at her, a sense of pride swelling within him. "We did it," and for the first time he felt like he had truly found his place in the galaxy.